What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you are new here, welcome to my channel and welcome back to another True Crime Sunday. I know that I've taken some time off. I've been going through some things. The Christmas period is really difficult for me, and then for the weeks before that I was going through like a rocky kind of period in terms of my love life. I know that I mentioned it a little bit in one of the story times, which was one of the last videos that I uploaded, that I was going through a breakup, and it's not even like it's so complicated, and I'm still going through it. That, and I've moved house. So I moved house yesterday. This is the new place, and I still need to sort out the last place, and I've only got till Monday, so I'm just going to quickly do a True Crime Sunday for you guys. It is actually a short kind of case because there isn't a lot of information on this one, but I wanted to do this one because I wanted to do it for a while. And when I first heard about this particular case, it was a missing persons case that the true crime YouTuber either didn't do all the research, or they may have missed it. No, it was probably just a Wikipedia read through, to be honest. I only got up to the bit where she was missing, and they didn't tell me the rest of the stuff, and they didn't really go through many theories, and so I'm gonna be doing like a whole encompassing video today, like I usually do with my True Crime Sundays. But today we're going to be talking about Dorothy Scott. So Dorothy was born on April 23rd, 1948. So this is a very old case. This is what she looked like, and if you can't see the screen, she was a Caucasian lady. She had dark hair, fairly light skin, but the photos of her are kind of old. You can't really see too much about her, but I'm not quite sure what her eye color is, and I didn't catch that. But if you know what her eye color was, feel free to pop that down below. Dorothy had a 4-year-old son at the time, and his name is Sean. There are conflicting reports. So they either lived with Dorothy's sister or Dorothy's aunt, but either way it was just a short drive from Dorothy's parents' house, and when Dorothy went to work, that's where Sean would be. And Dorothy's parents had no issue looking after Sean. The reason that Sean had to go to his grandparents' place while his mum was at work was because when his mum split with Dennis Terry, which is his dad, he actually moved to Missouri, so there was no custody agreement where it split. It's just... So Dorothy actually worked for two shops, so they're owned by the same company, but they're two different shops, and she was a secretary for both of them. And the shops are kind of like... there's not so many in Australia because that's all illegal, but one of them sold like drug what's the word, paraphernalia, is that the word? Just like pipes and stuff like that for like weed, and just a whole bunch of like weed stuff. But then the other one was like kind of hippie, like lava lamps and all that kind of stuff. So she worked for both of them, both different shops, but they're both owned by the same people. However, one of the shops used to be owned by Dorothy's father. So he sold the shop, but he still stayed around and did like maintenance and handiwork there. And so his daughter, Dorothy, who we're talking about today, worked for both of them. Even though Dorothy worked for a shop that sells psychedelics and all this kind of stuff, she was always described as being somebody who... she just didn't do drugs. She didn't even drink. She was a devout Christian. She didn't really go out. And at the time of her disappearance, her father said that she wasn't, to their knowledge, she wasn't actively dating anyone, and she wasn't actively going out dating people. They even said that Dorothy was the kind of person who, instead of going out, she would actually prefer to stay home with her son and just have a quiet night in. So Dorothy didn't have a boyfriend at the time, and it was in the earlier months of 1980 that she started to receive some very strange phone calls from an unidentified male. And as they progressed, they got even scarier. They started by calling her at her workplace, but then as the months went on, they started calling at her parents' place. The man would say exactly where she was, exactly what she was wearing. He started giving her gifts, saying, go outside right now, like, look at your car. And then when she'd go outside, there'd be like a dead rose on her, like in her windshield. Thing. But then he went on from gifts to saying that he was going to kill her, saying that he loved her, saying that he would cut her up into little pieces and no one would ever find her. And this scared Dorothy to the point where she considered getting a handgun. And then about a week before her disappearance, she started doing self-defense classes. They were karate classes. When the caller called her mum and Dorothy wasn't home, he would end up telling Vera, hey, I've killed your daughter, or like, your daughter has been killed. And it was just constant phone calls. When Dorothy was asked about these phone calls, because they were getting progressively worse and more phone calls were coming through, they weren't just at her work anymore, they were at both her workplace and her parents' house. She said that she doesn't know who the person is, but she recognizes the voice from somewhere. She just can't pick where it was, who it was, you know, who the voice belonged to. All of this came to a head on May 28th, 1980, when she would go into a 9 p.m. staff meeting, and one of her co-workers looked like he was really sick, and he had this red mark on his arm. And both Dorothy and another co-worker named Pam were like, you might need to go to the hospital. And he was like, no, I'm fine. But then throughout the meeting, he got progressively worse. So Conrad, who was the sick man, his condition got a lot worse, and both Pam and Dorothy said, hey, we're gonna take you to the emergency room. And so they did. So all three of them were at the emergency room, and it turned out to be a black widow spider. But now, black widow spiders are considered to be the most venomous spider in North America, but their bites aren't usually fatal. They do say that if you get bitten by a black widow spider, that you should find the spider, capture it, and bring it in with you when you go to the hospital. So luckily he got into the hospital and he got treated and everything was fine. But something to note, that when Dorothy dropped Pam and Conrad at the emergency room, she actually left for a little bit to go check on her son at her parents' place, and also to change her scarf. So she changed from wearing a black scarf to a red scarf, and then she came back to the hospital. She met Pam and Conrad, and then when it came time for Conrad to fill his prescription and do some insurance paperwork, she was like, oh, hey guys, I'll just go to the restroom real quickly and then I'll bring the car around so you don't have to walk all the way into the parking lot. And so that's what they did. She went to the bathroom real quickly, and then when they came out, they actually saw her car coming towards them, but like really quickly, like real fast. So all of this was happening at 11 p.m. That's when his prescription was filled. And so that meant that everything was dark, and that meant that the headlights on her car were on. And both Pam and Conrad say that when the car sped towards them, they were blinded by the headlights and they couldn't see who was actually driving the car. But they did say that when the car passed them, it sped all the way out and turned right. When the car sped past them, they did scream out to Dorothy saying, hey, stop, you know, like you would. But they assumed that the reason she didn't stop was because there must have been some sort of emergency with her son. So they decided to wait a couple of hours just to see if she would call them and be like, hey guys, I'm so sorry that I didn't come and get you. Do you guys need a ride now? There was, you know, this thing came up or whatever, just to explain why she had sped off so suddenly and basically ditched them at the emergency room. But that call never came. So when they realized that she hasn't even tried to make contact and they realized it was really out of her character, they decided to call her parents and be like, what's going on, what happened? But Dorothy didn't go back to her parents' place, and when her parents got the call, they were extremely concerned and they filed a missing persons report. But it would only be 5 hours later at 4:30 in the morning when her car would be found in an alleyway set on fire with absolutely no sign of her abductor or of Dorothy. The car was found around 16 kilometers away from the hospital. And then for 4 years, usually on a Wednesday, so for 4 years after Dorothy went missing, the calls continued. The caller would usually say things like, I've murdered her or I've got her. And it was usually Vera who would answer the phone. It was Vera. Every single time that the caller called, it was Vera who answered the phone. The first time that the caller called after the abduction, the caller said, are you related to Dorothy? And Vera was like, yeah. That's when he started saying that he'd murdered her or that he'd killed her and that he's got her. But because it was Vera who was answering the phone for those 4 years on a Wednesday, I'm assuming that Dorothy's dad maybe worked or, you know, did something. The caller was, I guess, used to harassing Vera, but one day it was Dorothy's dad who answered the phone, and all of a sudden the caller just hung up. There was a dry spell of no calls after that day for about 4 months, and the only reason that the calls started up again is because Dorothy's body was found. So it was in April of 1984, 4 years after that mysterious abduction, that Dorothy's remains were found by a construction worker on the side of a road, but they were found next to a dead dog's remains. So they were lying side by side. Now the remains were partly charred. So the police say that they think that they've been there for a minimum of 2 years because there were bushfires that went across that area, and that was 2 years prior. So minimum she's been there for 2 years, but there was no way for them to find the cause of death because they were just remains. It wasn't really a body, it was just skeletal remains. The way that Dorothy was initially identified was because there were some personal items with her remains, and it was a turquoise ring and also her watch. Something interesting about the watch though is that it had stopped at 12:30 on the day that she was taken, and that was only an hour after the car park incident. And then the final identification of Dorothy's remains was made by 8 molars in comparing them to her dental records. And because her remains were found, the calls started up again, but this made the police really pay attention, and they installed a tapping device on their phone which recorded and also attempted to trace the calls when they came. Now the police do have recordings of the voice, but they have not released them. But because the calls were just way too brief, way too short, they could never trace any of the calls. But when Dorothy initially went missing, the local newspaper did a story on it, and then when her body was found, this person called the editor of that newspaper and said that he had killed Dorothy because he was in love with her. He claimed that there was some sort of relationship between the two, and that he killed her because she was seeing somebody else. He did mention in this phone call things that were never released to the public, and that's why the police think that the person who's been calling both the newspaper, both Dorothy when she was alive and Dorothy's parents when Dorothy was dead or missing, that this is the person who is responsible. So this caller knew about 2 things that weren't released to the public. The first one is that Conrad was bitten by a black widow spider. This caller claimed to know all about that, and then the next thing was that the caller knew that she had changed from a black scarf to a red scarf. None of this was released to the media, to the public, anything like that, and that's why police think that the caller is the person who is responsible. Now the caller said that he knew Dorothy's whereabouts because apparently she had called him because they were in a relationship and told him about the spider bite and about where she was, and that's how he claims that he knew. But Pam, who was the other co-worker at the time, said that no, Dorothy was with me the whole time and I didn't see her go to a payphone. Dorothy was in her sight with them the whole entire time. The only time that she may have been apart was when she went to the restroom, but that would have been way too close to the abduction time, so it doesn't make sense that she would have called. There was one other suspect at the time, but he was ruled out, and that was her ex. But again, he lives in Missouri, his alibi was airtight, it checked out, and so that's why this caller is the only suspect. But who is the caller? There is a theory online that the caller is Mike Butler. Now, Mike Butler had a sister who worked for the same company that Dorothy did, and actually worked with Dorothy for a very short period of time. And that's where the internet has kind of connected the two. And there was town talk that Mike Butler used to be obsessed with Dorothy, that he was like this weird guy that was into cult stuff, and you know, the town chatter, like that's the town weirdo. But the reason that people think that it makes way more sense is because the caller didn't call back for 4 months after Dorothy's father Jacob answered the phone that time. And people think it's because, remember at the start of the video when I said that Dorothy's dad used to own the business? They're saying that Jacob might have crossed paths with the caller at some point, and that's why the caller freaked out. Maybe her dad would be able to recognize who the voice belongs to. And the reason that would be is if it was Mike Butler who crossed paths with his sister's boss at some point in time. That would kind of make sense. If Mike Butler knew Dorothy, then maybe he knew Dorothy's dad. Knew is a very loose term used here. So like if he crossed paths with Dorothy at some point enough to be obsessed with her, then maybe he's crossed paths with her dad enough for him to recognize the voice. I think this theory is a little bit it's very stretched thin, because in this theory the bloggers that are, you know, putting this theory forward are saying that, well, Mike Butler is a mechanic, or he's into like auto parts and stuff like that, and there was an auto parts kind of like the shop that she was working in was in a complex, and there was an auto parts shop that was also in that complex, and so they're saying, what if Mike Butler worked there at one point in time? There's no proof that he ever did, but they're saying because he was into that stuff and there was a shop there, maybe he worked there and that's how he knew Dorothy. Or, you know, there are lots of different ways that they could have known each other. But I don't know how real this Mike Butler person is, and I don't know how real any of these facts are. It's just an internet theory. They're also saying that because the town says that Mike Butler was into cult stuff and he's one of those weirdos, that would explain why Dorothy's remains were next to a dead dog's remains. Like they were laying there at the same time apparently. But again, I do want to mention that this is just an internet rumor. It's just a it comes from the town's talk. So town rumors that Sean, which is Dorothy's living son, even though he doesn't remember anything about his parents, he's taking the words of the town, all the gossip, and they're saying that Mike Butler was this weirdo who, he's now dead, just FYI. He's not alive anymore. I don't know how real any of these things are. I don't know how, you know, factual this theory is, but it is the only theory out there as to who the caller could be. Both Jacob and Vera, Dorothy's parents, have passed away, but at the height of the disappearance, there is a newspaper clipping from that time when they said that they just want they said something like, if this person who took our daughter had any kind of love or real compassion for our daughter at any time in their relationship, that the person who took Dorothy needs to give her body back so that she can have a proper Christian burial, and that once her body is returned, that they can go on living a somewhat normal life. And that is the entire case. It remains unsolved apart from that internet theory. Let me know if you guys have heard any other theories on this case. I haven't found anything else. I think that I've done a pretty good job researching, but I may have missed something. So let me know down below what you think or what you've heard, and we'll have a nice little discussion in the comment section. These types of cases where they're unsolved really, like, they get me, because it's like anyone can go missing, anyone can be taken, and you have no idea where they are or what happened. Like, I mean, obviously when the body comes back, you know what happened, but even cases like the Tara Grinstead case, like, that took so long for it to come to a head, and that was only because someone slipped. But anyways, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up because it really does help, and if you want to see more true crime videos from me, give me a subscribe. I also do some like normal videos on a Wednesday usually, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Give me some suggestions on what you want me to look into next, and I might do a video on it next Sunday.